Welcome to another episode of Recap Ethiopia, your number one source for a summary of events in Ethiopia over any given week. This week's episode of the show will cover the briefing by the Ethiopian Prime Minister Dr. Adhanom to the House of People's Representatives regarding the situation in Tigray. In addition, the complaint against WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom and the recognition to the longest-serving African diplomat, Ambassador Konjit Sinagiorgis, by the Japanese government will be discussed in this episode. I'm Wangel Tamene, and this is Recap Ethiopia. The former member of the TPLF leadership and the first African Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, is facing potential prosecution at the International Criminal Court following a complaint made by David Steinman. The American TV producer and author of the book Money, Blood and Conscience gave a press conference on Monday, November 30, 2020, regarding the details of the complaint, where he answered questions about jurisdiction, merit, and the next steps of the case. According to Steinman, Dr. Tedros is facing charges of facilitating the widespread and systematic ethnic and political crimes committed by the TPLF during his active engagement in Ethiopian politics. Steinman said that in relation to the jurisdiction of the International Court, key principles in international law, such as the effect doctrine, where the ICC assumes jurisdiction whenever the action of the defendant affects other countries, and the ad hoc jurisdiction principle, in which the ICC can have jurisdiction over whenever the country requests jurisdiction, apply in its circumstance. Diplomatic immunity was ruled out in the current case because of the gravity of the alleged crimes and the jurisprudence of the ICC. With regards to the defendant, Dr. Tedros, Steinman said that because the government has issued arrest warrants against 64 TPLF leaders, he has emerged as the only defendant in the current case. Dr. Tedros has not yet been named in an arrest warrant by the federal government. According to the press conference, the next steps are highly dependent on the Ethiopian government because a formal request to the ICC is necessary for the court to have ad hoc or temporary jurisdiction over the matter. The International Criminal Court is subject to immense criticism by African nations for allegedly targeting African leaders and heads of states in the past, prompting ideas of mass exodus from the ICC from the leadership of the African Union. While one Ethiopian diplomat is potentially facing charges at the International Criminal Court, another is set to receive recognition. Veteran diplomat Ambassador Konjit Sinagiorgis is set to receive the Japan's Foreign Minister's Commendation for the year 2020. The former permanent representative of Ethiopia to the African Union and the UN Economic Commission for Africa, chairperson of Foreign Relations, Council of Ethiopia, and the ambassador to Australia, Egypt, Israel, Canada, and Mexico received recognition for efforts to promote mutual understanding between Japan and Africa, according to the Japanese mission to the African Union. The ambassador was also recognized by Dr. Abiy Ahmed in January 2020 in recognition of her distinguished contributions in diplomacy. Ambassador Konjit is the longest-serving African diplomat, kickstarting her career in 1962, a year before the establishment of the African Union. She is a pioneer female figure in Ethiopian and African politics, having been active for over 5 decades in diplomacy. She received her bachelor's degree in international affairs from University College London in 1954, as well as receiving the Carnegie Fellowship at Columbia University in 1963. In addition, Ambassador Hirut has also received an honorary degree from Addis University in 2016 for her contributions to the diplomatic arena for the past 5 decades. During a speech at the African Union, Ambassador Hirut Sinagiorgis said, "My career has been my life, and I sacrificed everything for it. There's no greater honor than serving one's country to the fullest," reflecting on her lengthy career that has seen her receive recognition from different bodies throughout her distinguished engagement. Now let's move on to the major story of this week's episode. On Monday, November 30, 2020, roughly 26 days after the conflict broke out and days after the Ethiopian National Defense Forces took control of Mekelle, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Ahmed, gave a lengthy briefing to the lower house of the Ethiopian Parliament. Before his 3-hour-long briefing, there were several questions from members of the Parliament, which mostly commended the leadership of the Prime Minister, the bravery of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, and the Amhara Special Forces and Militia, as well as calling for the TPLF to be named as a terrorist organization. The Prime Minister's address to the Parliament was detailed in nature, going back to the period where former Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn was in office. The Prime Minister also gave commentary about the realities of the Ethiopian government since he came to office before giving explanations on the current conflict. Recap Ethiopia will look at these statements in detail in the following section. At the beginning of his response, the Prime Minister said it is imperative to give such a detailed account of the reform process because of recurring questions from the parliamentarians as well as from Ethiopians. The Prime Minister said that period before the reform kicked off in April 2018 was an immensely tough time for Ethiopians. There were a number of killings and arrests during this time. According to the Prime Minister, who also said the intelligence agency played an immense role in this happening. Dr. Abiy said during this period there were also talks of a coup d'etat on the then Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn. However, according to the Prime Minister, because of the lack of unity in the group, these plans were not realized. The next step was the recruitment of the successor of the former Prime Minister. In this period, the Prime Minister said there were clear surveillance and intimidation against EPRDF leaders, which prompted what the Prime Minister called agents of the reform to record videos and written accounts of the reform should something happen. In this record, he said the buildings between the Oromia President's office and the OPDO office, which I used to work in, had weapons on them as well as patrol cars frequenting the area. Me and my compatriots recorded videos and gave it to the close allies to release should something happen to us. On the days leading up to the election of the next chairperson of the APRDF, which in turn would be the next Prime Minister of the country, the Prime Minister said arrest warrants were issued by the leadership of the TPLF, which controlled the intelligence agency. On March 27, 2018, the day of the election of the newest EPRDF chairperson, according to the Prime Minister, the TPLF leadership tried its best to guarantee an election outcome favorable to their interests. However, what the Prime Minister called members of the EPRDF leadership that wanted change were a big variable in changing the outcomes of the election. On March 27, 2018, the current Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, was elected as the chairperson of the EPRDF before officially assuming the role of Prime Minister in April 2018. However, according to the Prime Minister, the challenge from the leadership of the TPLF did not end there. He said the first months of his term in office were full of surveillance and intimidation as well. From personal guards of the Prime Minister being denied access to the premise of the palace, to house and office keys being in the hands of officials appointed by the intelligence agency. Dr. Abiy Ahmed said he faced challenges that were immense in nature. In addition to this, work visits to Somalia, Mekelle, Ambo, and other parts of the country in the beginning of Dr. Abiy's tenure were also full of problems that created tensions between his office and the intelligence agency. In addressing this issue, the Prime Minister said many politicians, members of the media, and the public say the measures taken were late. I was not even in a position to guarantee the safety of myself and my family, let alone address such forces in the country. Before stating that there is a lack of holistic consideration of the status and circumstances of the government in these criticisms made about his administration in the past. Perhaps one of the highlights of the speech was when the Prime Minister admitted that the government was weak. He concurred with the analysis of the public in terms of the inability of the government to take more swift actions against those responsible for different crimes across the nation. However, according to the head of the FDRE, this was not because of a lack of wanting to, but because of institutional incapacity. The Prime Minister stated that key institutions such as the military, the intelligence agency, and other institutions were highly dominated by party ideology and ethnic power consolidation. In the military, the Prime Minister said ethnic representation was not present, giving detailed examples. 60% of full-star generals, 50 lieutenant generals, 45% of major generals, 40% of brigadier generals, 58% of colonels, and 68% of lieutenant colonels, and 53% of majors in the Ethiopian National Defense Forces were from one area, namely Tigray. An average 55% of the leadership in the military forces of Ethiopia were from the Tigray region, which, according to the Prime Minister, would make it impossible to correct this lack of diversity because of the nature of military appointments. The Prime Minister identified the lack of just representation as one of the causes for the situation that unfolded in the Tigray region. On top of this, the Prime Minister said 80% of the institutional leadership of the defense forces was dominated by the Tigray region. In the years leading to the tension compounding in the Tigray region, the Prime Minister stated that important work was done to correct this domination in the Ethiopian Defense Forces. The average percentage of military personnel from the region has dropped from 55% to 26%, as well as the leadership in commands dropping from 100% to 25%. The Prime Minister said with regards to lower ranks in the military, because of principles in military science, efforts of the government to restore diversity in the military have not been as successful. Another important aspect of the parliamentary speech by Dr. Abiy Ahmed was what many are considering as an explanation for the departure of former Minister of Defense Lamma Magarsa. The Prime Minister said that because of the recurrent and coordinated efforts of the TPLF in the past 2 years, several members of the Prosperity Party, though no names were mentioned or identified, started to lose hope on the efforts of the administration. Following these efforts by the TPLF, which were accompanied by the harm to Ethiopian citizens across the country, as well as a deteriorating security condition in the country, the Prime Minister said a tendency to lose hope it was better to work with the TPLF leadership started to take ground in the party, resulting in some members to leave the party. Regarding the security concerns in the country, the Prime Minister said that there have been 113 incidents of violence in Ethiopia over the past 2.5 years, also stating that none of these incidents took place in the Tigray region. The Prime Minister said in the period since he came to office, there have been 37 incidents of conflicts in the Oromia region, 7 in the Gambela region, 23 in the Amhara region, 15 in the Benishangul Gumuz region, as well as 14 incidents of conflict in Addis Ababa. In contrast, the Prime Minister said there were no incidents of violence in the Tigray region despite similar multi-ethnic composition of the region. With regards to the killing of the prominent pop star and public figure Hachalu Hundesa, the Prime Minister said that his killing was part of a premeditated attack to harm prominent figures in the country in order to incite violence, before stating that the efforts of security forces made it possible to reduce the harm done by the premeditated attack. Another important clarity that was offered in the speech of the Prime Minister was related to the conflict that has cut the Tigray region from the rest of the country for the past month. The Prime Minister said the conflict broke out because of a miscalculation by the TPLF that if the Northern Command fell, the defense forces would not be able to withstand an attack by its special police and militia. However, according to the Prime Minister, because the government had in secrecy increased the capacity of the air forces, especially in terms of technological advancements such as drones and unmanned aircrafts, the Prime Minister said that the TPLF had attacked the biggest military bases in the country and advanced into the Amhara regional state, which prompted the government to carry out counterattacks efforts by the command center in Arakilo. And no civilian casualty claim on the part of the Ethiopian Defense Forces was made by the Prime Minister. The Tigray people were also said to be supportive of the defense forces in their bid to complete their mission in Tigray. Negotiations are also underway with what the Prime called legal authorities within the Tigray Regional State Administration. However, the Prime Minister assured that no negotiation with criminals will be made in the coming times as well. In addition, the Prime Minister said that there were consultations with the residents of Mekelle on Sunday, November 29, 2020, stating that the response from the community there is one of relief and excitement. Eritrea was also covered by the speech. The commander-in-chief recalled the statement by the TPLF leadership about the alleged involvement of Eritrean forces in the fight, but stating that the Eritrean authorities were instrumental in clothing and arming Ethiopian soldiers from the northern command of the Ethiopian National Defense Force, who fled to Eritrea following the attacks. In this regard, the Prime Minister said that the incident proved that the Eritrean people and government is an ally to the Ethiopian people. The Prime Minister commended the bravery of the defense forces as well as the partnership of regional states of the country as well as neighboring countries such as Kenya, Sudan, South Sudan, Eritrea, and Somalia for supporting the efforts of the federal government to defeat the TPLF in what the government continues to call a law enforcement operation to restore the rule of law. However, other members of the international community were chastised by the Prime Minister for not understanding the internal political context of the country, not respecting the sovereignty of the country and the intentions of the TPLF in their advocacy and call for peace in the past 3 weeks of the conflict in Tigray. Dr. Abiy compared the current conflict to the American Civil War before saying that no government will hold dialogue with group that attacks its military base in the way that TPLF did, also stating that the opening of a humanitarian corridor is the priority of the Ethiopian government as well. Finally, the Prime Minister gave important updates regarding the next steps in the Tigray region, stating that the Situation Room in Addis Ababa is closely monitoring the movement of the remnant TPLF forces and their commanders in the area close to Mekelle, known as Hagere Selam. He promised swift justice and apprehension, stating that the TPLF is still using civilians as human shields, as well as the thousands of non-Tigray civilians and Ethiopian soldiers they have kidnapped in the area. The Commander-in-Chief of the National Defense Forces stated that the priority of the government is restoring rule of law and basic services to the region, as well as providing redress to crimes committed during the conflict. Rehabilitation of the region will commence immediately, according to the Prime Minister, with the Prime Minister saying his administration plans to restore the 30,000 plus displaced due to the conflict to their homes. However, a claim by the Prime Minister that captured the attention of many was made in relation to this as well, when he said that a majority of the refugees registered in camps in Sudan are male Tigrayans with possible involvement in the Maikadra attack and other crimes. Redress was promised for this. The Prime Minister walked out to a standing ovation following his speech at the House of People's Representatives. Following the above seminal address, the Prime Minister held discussions with political parties and representatives from the civil society organizations and the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia on the 3rd of December, in which his office announced that they have reached an understanding on ways to ensure the 2021 elections are free and fair. The Prime Minister reaffirmed his government's unwavering effort to lay the foundation for free and fair elections in Ethiopia. During the discussion, Attorney General Gideon Timotheos made a presentation on the role of different stakeholders and an overview on the electoral system for the upcoming national election scheduled for mid-2021. He underscored that the importance of the upcoming election, which will be held following the political and institutional reforms Ethiopia has been undertaking for the last 2.5 years, also noting the consequential nature of the upcoming election for Ethiopia's journey to democracy.